This is Research Like a Pro, episode 341, The Value of Negative Evidence. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogist professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the authors of Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. With Robin Worthland, they also co-authored the companion volume, Research Like a Pro with DNA. Join Diana and Nicole as they discuss how to stay organized, make progress in their research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go! Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Research Like a Pro. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Nicole. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? What you working on?
Well, it's the first of the year, so I'm working on getting organized again. And I realized that I have not been tracking my projects very well for the last year or two. I made that great template for tracking projects, and I just got busy and forgot to update it. So I've been working the last couple of days on making sure I've got all of my research logs and reports and documents, everything noted in that template, because it's the only way I can remember what I've done. It's so weird that I just keep forgetting that I've done projects. I don't know about you, but I've done so many now that sometimes I forget.
Yeah, it's really funny because I was looking back at previous research I had done for the 14-day challenge, and I couldn't remember what I did. And I had to actually search through the challenge Facebook group to try to find what I had posted, because I couldn't even remember to search through my Google Drive because I had just saved the project documents to the ancestors folder, and there's so many folders that I didn't even know where to look. It was really funny to just realize what I had done. And of course, when I started looking at it, it came back, but I couldn't pull it out of thin air. So it is so valuable to have something to track the projects you've done. And I have a spreadsheet in Google Sheets that I started a couple of years ago that's like all of my Research Like a Pro projects that I've done in the study groups and in the 14-day challenge. And I have a link to the project document that I've done. And keeping that updated has been so helpful to kind of see what I've done. And when I'm choosing a new objective, to be able to look at that and see, do I want to continue any of these projects or do I want to start a new one? And I'm going to put them all into Airtable, because after updating the Google Sheet the other day, I was getting annoyed because Airtable is so much better to put things in a table and you can have all these different views and things. And so I'm going to add and update your Airtable project tracker for paternal ancestors, since those are the projects I've worked on. I haven't done any projects on your mom's side, and I think it would be fun and interesting to do, but I haven't. And then I need to start an Airtable tracking base for research I've done on my husband's side, the Dyer side. And then I'll start a base. I'll just copy and duplicate your project tracking base for Dad's side to put in the elder research that we've done. So it'll be good to really just have a home base to look and see what projects we've done, have links to all of the reports and the project documents and whatever was created for that project, and just feel like we know what we've done.
Exactly what we've written about, because I've also got a place in that template for blog posts and podcasts and presentations, because we use a lot of our research in our teaching, and sometimes I will forget that I even wrote a blog post about something. And so I've been trying to do that as well. And I also have a link to our ancestry tree for the page for the ancestor and the family search page. And then we also have a place for the DNA, which is really nice, our DNA test takers. So we know who's got a Y-DNA test done or a mitochondrial DNA test done. So I remember we started working on this, doing this template probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it is just so fun to see how valuable it is. So I'm excited at the beginning of this year to get it all updated and be able to take a look and think about what research I want to accomplish this year.
Yes, I am excited about that too. And it is kind of fun, but also I wish that I could accomplish more in a year. I wish I could be getting more projects done. And sometimes it's hard to look at the spreadsheet and see all of the projects that I couldn't solve about half of them I feel like I've completed, and the other half I feel like need more work and I need to put more phases into it. And sometimes I feel like I just wish I could finish that one and find the answer and wrap it up, or just have a chance to actually work on it. So it's good to have the 14-day challenge to be able to do a smaller project and add another phase of research for something.
Well, and I think the 14-day challenge is perfect for some of the ancestors that we have not really touched before. In this phase of better research, we did the basics back in the day, and it's always really fun to go back to those ancestors and then perhaps research the context, or try to put everything together in a written report or a little narrative. So I'm looking at these blank spaces on here for ancestors that I haven't really touched like that, and thinking, wow, I really would love to do something on some of these. But also, I feel like it shows your body of work in one place, whether you do it in a spreadsheet or you do it in an Airtable base. We may not feel like we're getting a lot done, that we're making that much progress, but when you look at these and you go, wow, I have done a lot of work in the last few years on these ancestors. And so I'm feeling pretty accomplished at how much I've done. And even though some of them aren't completely finished yet, getting closer and closer. And I also was going to say, when you were saying that you feel like you haven't come to a good conclusion, I think there's a value in putting aside an ancestor for a while and coming back a few years later, even because maybe more records are available, or you've learned something new that will help you, or you just see it with fresh eyes. And so it's a good thing we have a lot of ancestors, so we can go try a new one if we get tired of researching one, right?
Right? It's so true. And whenever I go through and do a project where I'm listing all of the ancestors of a certain type, I realize how many people there are in our family trees that I can research. And I've been working on a project like that to list all of my husband's ancestors who were part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the early church in the like 1830s and 40s. And between us, we have a lot of them, and most of them I haven't ever researched. So that's something that's a goal for me this year, is to work on researching a lot of them and diving into the manuscript records of our church, which have been posted online. So it's going to be really interesting. But I think you're right that it's good to consider all of the work that we've done and not focus on the ones that are unfinished, but just to focus on what the good we've been able to do. And of course, we'll have more time in the future to work on it as we keep going forward and not giving up, obviously. And when you were saying more records become available, I was thinking about the full text search and how, one of my previous projects that I kind of abandoned for a while about George Welch's parents, I would like to use the full text search to help me with that, because it was kind of a lot of fan club research for the Welches and distinguishing Welches of similar names and that kind of thing. So that might be a really helpful tool to solve that one.
Well, I think that absolutely will. And as Family Search uses their AI programs to make more of these records that they've got, this immense collection out there, full text searchable, it could be that will really open some doors for us and make things a little bit easier. And they're continuing to get things microfilmed or digitized now, because we know from your experience that a lot of the courthouses in Oklahoma have not been digitized, their records. So we have a lot of records that still are not really available to us readily online. So that'll be exciting to have those eventually done, we hope.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I learned more about Oklahoma, I found that a bunch of them are putting their own records online on a different website that Oklahoma uses. So they have some indexes and you can still find a lot of things online. So if it's not on Family Search, don't assume it's not online, I guess is something else I learned, because it could be online on a different website that some county or state is using.
Absolutely. When I was doing my Dallas County deeds, it was a whole different website. They were all there to view. There was an index and you could look at them digitally, but it was through their own website. So really have to do your research. Well, I guess we better get going on our actual topic of the day, speaking of Dallas County. But first, let's do some announcements. We're excited for our Research Like a Pro webinar series. And coming up on Tuesday, February 18th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we have got Kathy Duncan presenting Texas Migration Patterns and DNA Connect Lucinda Wright Rinker to her father. So this will be fascinating. The description states Lucinda Wright married A.F. Rinker in 1874 in Johnson County, Texas. After Lucinda entered the Texas State Lunatic Asylum in 1880, her paper trail ends. What exists does not name her father. Records from 4 Texas counties connect the A.F. Rinker and Silas Wright families through parallel migrations. DNA seals the deal. So the topics we will be discussing will be Texas non-population schedules, tax records, court records, Texas state law, land grants, civil work pension applications, and ancestry DNA. Well, I'm especially interested in this one because, of course, we have a lot of Texas ancestors. But after we talked about the story of the woman who was put into the asylum by her husband because he didn't like her religious views, now I always question when I see these stories of women being put away and wondering why. So I don't know if this webinar will talk about that much, but I'm fascinated to hear what Kathy will have to say. For news of everything we're doing and for coupons for any sales we might be having, be sure to join our newsletter. It comes out every Monday. And we're excited about upcoming conferences. Roots Tech is coming quickly. It will be March 6th through 8th in Salt Lake City. And the National Genealogical Society Conference will be May 23rd to 26th in Louisville, Kentucky. And we are excited to be in person at both of those events and to be presenting some really fun topics. Well, we're also excited for our 14-day Research Like a Pro challenge, which begins tomorrow, January 21st. So today, if you're listening to this when this comes out on the 20th, is the last day to sign up for the email prompts. And you just go to familylocket.com/challenge. And you can join us for a fun 2 weeks of researching an ancestor.
Great. I hope a bunch of you will join us. And we always look forward to this opportunity to work on our own family, like we were talking about earlier. Today, we're talking about negative evidence. And in genealogy, what we don't find can be just as important as what we do find. And we will return to our case study of Henderson Weatherford that we've been talking about for the last few weeks and learn about how careful attention to negative evidence helped break down a challenging brick wall and disprove commonly accepted relationships. Negative searches become negative evidence when we correlate them with other records and compile them in written form.
Well, this is one of the ancestors that we had researched back in the day, and I really didn't know for sure who were his parents, so I had assigned 2 sets of parents to him. Most researchers assumed he was the son of William Weatherford, who had died in Dallas County in 1849. Because both men lived in Dallas County in the 1860s, well, William had died, but his family had lived on there in Dallas County, and it just seemed like a logical connection. But when I actually dug into the records and I looked up William's probate, he had a probate file, and it specifically listed the only heirs of said estate. And the heirs listed were Thomas Benton Weatherford, Elizabeth Nancy Weatherford, 2 women, Elizabeth Weatherford and Nancy Weatherford, Hardin Weatherford and wife Polly, and then Nancy Weatherford, the widow. No mention of Henderson, and his absence from this list really was significant. In 1849, when William died and his estate was probated, Henderson was very much alive. He was just over in Morgan County, Missouri. And it seems like if he had been William's son, he would likely have been listed among the heirs.
Agreed. And I think that's really strong negative evidence to be able to look at that and say, he's not listed here. It says these are all the heirs. And Texas law at this time says the children are the heirs. So either he was adopted or he's not one of those children. And it seems more likely that he's not one of the children. He's just a different Weatherford. And although we thought the Weatherford name was really uncommon because we'd never heard it before, it seems like it was more common than we realized.
Yeah, there are a lot of Weatherfords out there, which is often the case when we just haven't had the experience of that name, of hearing or working with that name. There's actually more than you think sometimes.
Right. I think it's such a common assumption for genealogists to make that, there's nobody else with this name, or this is the only family of this surname. And once we start working on more advanced cases, you realize how many people of the similar name or even the same exact name live in the state, in the county, in the area. And you have to distinguish the people and see if they were part of the same family or not. Well, he wasn't just missing from that probate record, he was also missing from the tax records. And Henderson, we didn't really know exactly when he died, but tax records really helped figure that out because we could trace him a little bit more closely by looking at the taxes. With the federal census, we have 10 years in between. And so you really don't get a very detailed view of when he died. But what we had is that in 1860, Henderson appeared on Dallas County tax rolls, paying taxes on 2 acres and working as a blacksmith. But then the next year in 1861 and 1862, he is not listed in Dallas County tax lists. The other Weatherfords appear on the tax list, though. And then eventually in 1863 and 1864, his property is listed under Samuel Beeman per H. Weatherford. And that indicates that he was probably deceased by that time, and Samuel Beeman was paying the taxes. And we don't really know who he is at this point. And then in 1865, there was no listing for Henderson Weatherford or Samuel Beeman regarding his property on the tax list. So this pattern really suggests that Henderson died in those years where he wasn't listed at all. And then we figured out that the Samuel Beeman was his son-in-law. And so now we have an actual connection in the tax records showing an association of a family member with Henderson Weatherford. And so this is his son-in-law, and in 1863 and 1864, this son-in-law was paying the taxes for his father-in-law, who was probably deceased, and handling the remaining property matters. And by 1865, all the property matters were probably settled, and that's why there was no longer a tax record for that.
Right. And an interesting thing from having done all the research for all the Weatherfords in Dallas County, there was a Jefferson Weatherford who seemed very wealthy, and he handled the estates and the probate and paid taxes for all sorts of the other Weatherford people. And so it seems like if Henderson had been a part of this family, this would have been his probable either a brother or an uncle would have handled his as well. So the fact that we don't even have Jefferson Weatherford involved in this at all, and we've gotten said Samuel Beeman, it just is making distance, separating the families. Well, another piece of negative evidence in this research was from the Dallas County probate records. Henderson did have property and he had a family, so you would think that there would be a probate file upon his death, but there was no probate. I searched the index, we did full text searches of the court records, looked at deed records after 1861, and there just was nothing. So this absence suggests that either he died elsewhere, perhaps he disposed of his property before his death, or maybe his estate by that time was too small to require probate. So often with negative searches, they lead us to looking at something else. And I do want to continue the research on him to see if I can discover this idea of maybe him dying somewhere else. So we have more negative evidence piling up about Henderson.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we kind of skip over the probate and just assume that there wasn't any if we don't find it in the place where we think. But you're right, he could have gone somewhere else. And maybe there is a record somewhere. It's good to keep our minds open and search all different avenues. Well, let's have a word from our sponsor. The new year is the perfect time to start or restart your genealogy research with fresh eyes and new goals. Dig even deeper into your family history with newspapers.com, the largest online newspaper archive. If you're a genealogist, you know old newspapers can help you find forgotten stories and fill in the gaps between vital records. That's where newspapers.com comes in. A subscription to newspapers.com gives you access to over 1 billion pages of historical newspapers from across the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond. Whether you're tracking down your great grandmother's obituary or uncovering a long lost photo, you'll be amazed at the treasures waiting for you in more than 3 centuries of newspapers. And when you find something interesting, newspapers.com makes it easy to share it with family and friends. You can even save it directly to your ancestry tree. For listeners of this podcast, newspapers.com is offering a special discount of 20%. Just use the code FamilyLocket at checkout. Kickstart your year in genealogy with newspapers.com.
Thank you. Well, perhaps the most telling negative evidence, as I've hinted at, comes from comparing Henderson's property location with that group of established Dallas County Weatherfords. And doing the tax research from 1847 to 1864, I found some really distinct patterns. So the Dallas County Weatherford group, they consistently owned land on the Trinity River watercourse, and they were centered around the Lancaster post office area. They gradually had accumulated large land holdings over time, and you could see clear property relationships with land passing between family members. We would see a husband dying and then his wife paying taxes, or a child paying taxes on land a father had owned. And as I had mentioned, this Jefferson Weatherford acted as the administrator and even guardian for several of the family members.
Well, let's compare and contrast that with where Henderson lived. He owned just 2 acres near Cyene Post Office, Syene, about 20 miles from Lancaster. Do you have any idea how that's pronounced?
I just always think of it as Cyene, but
Cyene.
I don't
And
know.
one thing that is interesting is that he did not ever own land on the Trinity River. So the absence of him being near the other Weatherfords, another piece of negative evidence that he was probably not close with them or associated or related to them. He maintained a small property suited to his blacksmith trade, and he had no property transactions at all with other Weatherfords. And he did not have any estate administration by Jefferson Weatherford, the other Weatherford family's primary business manager. So, this separation in location and complete lack of business dealings between Henderson Weatherford and the other Weatherfords argues against a family connection. And if Henderson had been part of the Dallas County Weatherford family, we would expect to see property near the other family members, possibly a land transaction with relatives, similar watercourse locations, business dealings with Jefferson Weatherford, and maybe a residence closer to his supposed mother. Now, this doesn't prove there wasn't a connection, but it is evidence.
Right. And as we start putting things together, we can start building a case for that. So it was interesting to look at a map, and I actually found this map when I was doing a project on Henderson's daughter Isabella and using artificial intelligence to help me do a locality guide on Dallas County. And it found this great map of Dallas County with post offices. So often we see the post office listed in the census, but we don't always know exactly where that was, especially if it didn't become a city. Some of those post offices just kind of, the little community sort of died out. But this one was a post office circa 1866, so it was right there at the time when this was all happening. And that was such a great find. It was over on the Library of Congress, and just, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You don't know where to look for something. So let's just kind of go back and think about some of the lessons we can learn from this. Well, for one thing, we have to really do the research. I had some theories, but it was not until I did that tax research and the probate records. You have to just thoroughly search everything before you can come to some type of a conclusion. And you've got to document those negative searches in multiple record types to build your case. Having a negative citation showing that you thought to search for all the probate is very, very important. And then we also have to think about what the missing evidence might mean and put it into a historical and legal context. So in this case, something that we really haven't discussed is the fact that this is all happening during the Civil War. during the Civil War, there was a lot of disruption everywhere, and especially in this area probably. So I would like to dig in more into that and see if maybe that is why we are not seeing probate, because who knows what was going on there. But we can use negative evidence to disprove family relationships, narrow time periods for events, and to suggest alternative research directions. So I am excited to think about, what else I could do to continue working on this case.
Yeah, that's great. It's nice to feel like you've disproved something and then be able to go forward in a different direction, or just be able to go forward and have the information that probably that relationship was wrong, not necessarily a whole new different direction, but using the information you found and building on it. And the place that it actually points to is back to Izard County, Arkansas, where he first appeared in historical records. And I love that this case really helps us to learn about assumptions. And we do have to let go of assumptions sometimes and listen to what the records or the lack of records are telling us. So now, why don't you all think about what brick walls in your research might benefit from a closer look at negative evidence? Do you have an assumption in your tree that isn't a valid assumption? Is one of your assumptions based on proximity, but you haven't looked at the probate records to see if your person appears as a child? Maybe you haven't looked as carefully as you could have. And when you look closer, sometimes your assumptions are overturned. And that's a beautiful thing. And it can lead you to the correct family for your ancestor. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we hope you have a great week.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our books, Research Like a Pro and Research Like a Pro with DNA on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our online courses or study groups of the same names. Learn more at familylocket.com/services. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our courses. To get updates in your email inbox each Monday, subscribe to our newsletter at familylocket.com/newsletter. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We read each review and are so thankful for them. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.